Minister, for 2 years now, the country has been watching a genocide unfold in Gaza in a complete state of disbelief. Wondering how can this be allowed to happen? How can so-called world leaders stand idly by as a genocide is live streamed before our eyes? I'm not dismissing the fact that Ireland recognised the state of Palestine. It was welcome. It's welcome that more countries are doing the same now. But ultimately, there is barely anything left to recognise. Gaza has been reduced to mass graves and rubble. So it is 2 years, too little, too late. Not to mention the fact that some of those countries now recognising Palestine are still arming Israel. And what exactly has it achieved? Israel has not hesitated in its continuing pursuit of wiping out a population. Why is there such a reluctance to take further action? It is so hard for people to comprehend. It's hard to even believe. We see footage of multiple babies packed into one incubator. We see parents cradling the bodies of their dead children. We see journalist after journalist annihilated. And then we see the government still dithering over the Occupied Territories Bill. Israel is starving Gaza, then killing people as they line up for food and water. They are bombing hospitals and refugee camps. They even bombed the team that were trying to negotiate a peace deal. This has been going on for 2 years. What more could it possibly take for this government to act with conviction, with consequence, with the might of the strength of feeling in this country? Where is the decisive action we saw when Russia invaded Ukraine? Where are the sanctions? Where is the proportionate, rational response to a genocide? The Western world has watched it all and done nothing, actually less than nothing. Minister, proposal to suspend parts of the EU-Israel trade agreement is finally on the cards. Making the announcement last week, Vice President of the European Commission, Kaja Kallas, said she wanted to be very clear. The aim is not to punish Israel. The aim is to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Let me say that again. The aim is not to punish Israel. After it razed Gaza to the ground, murdered more than 20,000 children and bombed every single hospital, this despicable and cowardly language is outrageous and it is shameful. Minister, as an EU citizen, I'm ashamed of that response. My question is, are you ashamed too?
Thank you, Deputy Minister, to respond.
Thank you very much, Deputy, for your question. And what's happening in Gaza is horrific slaughter. And it's not just me and you and every member of this House who's saying that. We saw recently that the United Nations Independent Commission has ruled that what's happening in Gaza and what Israel is doing is committing genocide. I suppose many people in Ireland feel a sense of helplessness in terms of what can be done in response to it. But my view is that this government has done more than any other government in the world in response to the plight of the Palestinian people in Gaza. If you look around the world, what stands out to you is the fact that there are so many countries, many Arab countries, who've done so little for the cause of the Palestinians in Gaza. In contrast, Ireland has led the way, not just in Europe, but internationally. Like you, I was very pleased to hear over the weekend that so many other countries have decided to recognise a Palestinian state. Portugal, France, Belgium, Luxembourg, Malta, Liechtenstein, New Zealand, UK, Canada and Australia. Very many of them small European countries. They followed the example that Ireland set when we, along with Spain and Norway, decided that we would recognise a Palestinian state. And there was huge pressure on the Irish government not to do that. But we did it because it was the right thing. And you can see what's happening is that the example set by Ireland is being followed by other EU countries. When you look in terms of the proposals to respond to trade between Israel and the EU, when Ireland advocated that we should introduce an occupied territories bill, when that was advocated at the European Union level, there was very little support. We now know that other countries are considering it and introducing it. In fact, that bill has been very effective from Ireland's point of view in terms of trying to get the EU-Israel trade agreement on the agenda. You're aware more than, like we all are in this House, of the historical alliances that exist between Israel and certain countries in the European Union. We can do very little about that, but the pressure that Ireland has put on is having an impact. And we can see now that the EU-Israel trade agreement is coming under consideration. I'm hopeful, and I know the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach are hopeful, that when it comes to suspension of that trade agreement, that measures will be taken. Of course, they should have been done very many years ago. But Ireland is a small country. We're an influential country. But all we can do is use our reputation and our influence to try to get people to follow our example. And you can see to date that that has been done. And when you look at the cases that were taken in the International Court, again, Ireland intervened and respected them. So, Deputy, you can criticise the government, but when you look at this objectively internationally, you'll see that the Irish government is one of the most vociferous supporters of Palestinian people and standing up to the genocide that's going on in Gaza.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Kearns.
Minister, like I said, we all welcome the countries are now recognising the state of Palestine, and we welcomed it when Ireland did it too. The point that I'm trying to make, and the point that you're ignoring, is that that is literally the bare minimum, and there is barely anything left to recognise. So the bar is quite literally on the floor when we're talking about Ireland being held up as an example, and that is the point that I'm trying to make. Because unless the international community acts, there is literally nothing left to recognise. The Israeli government haven't hid their genocidal intent. The Taoiseach acknowledged that yesterday. He said some Israeli ministers had genocidal intent from day one, and now it is day 720. So when is the response to Israel going to match the scale of its crimes? When is real action going to be taken? In this country, we could be doing more. Enacting the Occupied Territories Bill has been a solemn commitment of this government, an election commitment that hasn't been lived up to yet.
Thank you,
so,
Deputy.
Minister, can you give me a date? When will you enact the Occupied Territories Bill?
Thank you. Minister.
Well, it's in priority legislation and it will be enacted and certainly introduced into your office this term, we believe. Deputy, can I just make one important point that sometimes isn't emphasised enough? The entity responsible for the genocide in Gaza is the Israeli government. And we all need to point that out and state it repeatedly. And rather than criticising the Irish government for narrow domestic political purposes, I think you should acknowledge the very real efforts that have been made by the Irish government to support Palestine. And you mentioned what else has been done. We've taken, as I say, responses in respect to the cases that are before the International Court. We've provided 90 million. We have tried to influence our international partners. As I said to you, Ireland cannot just dictate to the rest of Europe, or indeed the rest of the world, as to what its foreign policy should do. Unfortunately, we can influence it, we can't dictate it. And you can see what's happening over those horrific 700 days, that people, other countries, are gradually coming around to recognise that the Irish government's position is the correct position.
Thank you, Minister.